Lesson 3, The Bill of Rights. Vocabulary: Federalist, Anti-Federalist, Bill of Rights, Proposal, Anarchy, Constitutional Republic, Popular Sovereignty. Academic vocabulary: Sufficient, Announce. Unlock the big question. I will know why delegates disagreed over the Constitution and how they resolved their differences. Jumpstart activity. Work in small groups to list rights you think all Americans should have. Compare your lists with other groups. How are the lists similar? How are they different? Once the Constitution was written, delegates as well as citizens were divided over striking the correct balance in government. Debates raged between both sides, resulting in a new compromise. Debate over the Constitution. The Constitution granted freedoms to American citizens unlike those granted in any other country. But there was still much to be debated. Delegates and citizens who supported the new Constitution were called Federalists. They were often wealthy merchants and plantation owners who wanted a strong central government. Those who supported the Articles of Confederation wanted more power to remain with the states. They were called Anti-Federalists. They were often farmers and tradesmen. Federalists wanted the states to be united into one powerful nation. They believed the Constitution would be good for the economy. Anti-Federalists, including Thomas Jefferson, did not think that Congress could pass laws that worked for all states. They feared the President and Congress would have too much power under the Constitution. Once Congress had adopted the Constitution, state conventions were held. These gave the public a place to learn about and discuss the new government. The Anti-Federalists were not able to oppose the Constitution in Congress. Therefore, they had to fight ratification, or official approval of the Constitution state by state at the conventions. Patrick Henry was an outspoken opponent of the Constitution. In June of 1788, he delivered several speeches to Virginia delegates at their convention. He tried to convince them not to ratify the Constitution. Primary source. Here is a revolution as radical, extreme, as that which separated us from Great Britain. Our rights and privileges are endangered, and the sovereignty, independence of the states will be relinquished, given up. And cannot we plainly see that this is actually the case? The rights of trial by jury, liberty, freedom of the press, all pretensions, claims to human rights and privileges are rendered, made, insecure, if not lost by this change, so loudly talked of by some, and inconsiderately by others. Patrick Henry, speech, June 5, 1788. The debates between Federalists and Anti-Federalists occurred in meeting halls, on the streets, and in newspapers and pamphlets. The debates revolved around the best form of government, what rights should be protected, and what powers should be given to the nation and states. 1. Reading check. Identify each person as either a Federalist or Anti-Federalist. I want a unified country and a stronger federal government. Alexander Hamilton. I want the power of the President and Congress to be limited and the states to make their own laws. Patrick Henry. Ratifying the Constitution. 9 of the 13 states had to ratify the Constitution for it to pass. At each state convention, Anti-Federalists gave speeches about the loss of individual freedoms under the Constitution. They argued that a Bill of Rights, which would guarantee basic rights for all citizens, should be added to the document. An initial proposal for a Bill of Rights had been rejected at the Constitutional Convention. Primary source. The powers reserved, kept, to the several states will extend to all the objects which concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity, success of the state. The operations of the federal government will be most extensive, greatest, and important in times of war and danger, those of the state governments in times of peace and security, safety. James Madison, Federalist, No. 45. This became a critical issue for the Anti-Federalists. They felt that if the federal government was given more power, individual rights had to be guaranteed by law. They argued that if the Federalists had cared about individual rights, they would have spelled this out in the Constitution. Federalists such as James Madison believed that the Constitution did a sufficient job of protecting liberty through the system of separation of powers. He worried that if the Constitution would not be ratified, there would be anarchy. Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay began writing essays. At first, the essays were published in New York newspapers. In 1788, they were published in a book called The Federalist. 85 essays outlined why the framers of the Constitution made the decisions they did. They also responded to the Anti-Federalists. In Federalist No. 45, James Madison argues that the states would keep their important role and power under the new government. When it became clear that including a Bill of Rights would speed ratification, Federalists made a concession. They announced that the first task of the new government would be adopting a list of basic individual rights. The U.S. Constitution was adopted by the Constitutional Convention in September 1787. New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify it 10 months later in June 1788. It was ratified by all 13 states in May 1790. 2. Reading check. A constitutional republic. The Constitution outlined a plan for government called a constitutional republic. This form of government has a constitution and citizens elect representatives to Congress. In this way, the government gets its authority from the citizens and cannot do anything without the people's consent. This idea is called popular sovereignty. Congress is based on the proposal that Roger Sherman made at the Constitutional Convention. It is made up of representatives and senators. Members of the House of Representatives serve for 2 years. States with larger populations elect a larger number of representatives. Members of the Senate serve for 6 years. Each state elects 2 senators. These members of Congress vote on and uphold the laws. The part they play in the separation of powers is important because many governmental tasks overlap, causing unavoidable conflict. The Constitution also explains how powers are shared between federal and state governments. The federal government can declare war, print money, levy taxes, make laws, and regulate trade between states and with other countries. States can ratify amendments to the Constitution, manage public safety, and regulate trade within the state. 3. Reading check. The Founding Principles. The new Congress began to govern on March 4, 1789. Keeping its promise made during the ratification of the Constitution, Congress proposed 10 amendments known as the Bill of Rights. Because the framers had been focused on creating the federal government, the Constitution did not focus on individual rights. Many had feared that if these rights were not clearly stated, the government might become too powerful and endanger the rights of citizens. Now the framers would list the rights each person was entitled to. The Bill of Rights, ratified in December 1791, protects freedoms including speech, religion, and the press, the right to assemble peacefully, and the right to bear arms. It also ensures a citizen's right to fair treatment within the judicial system. The rights outlined in this document are the founding principles of the country. Quest Connections. Highlight some of the founding principles of the Bill of Rights. Why do you think so many basic rights are in the Bill of Rights? 4. Reading check. In the chart, identify and circle 2 of the rights guaranteed by the Bill of Rights that you think are very important. The Bill of Rights. Amendments. Guaranteed rights.